The silence in my living room felt deafening as I stared at the remnants of what was supposed to be our perfect Christmas gathering. Red and green wrapping paper still littered the floor, and the scent of pine from our tree mixed with the lingering aroma of the honey ham I'd spent hours preparing. But all I could hear echoing in my mind were my daughter's words, spoken loud enough for every single person at our family dinner to hear. "Mom's the reason Dad left us. She drove him away with her constant nagging and criticism." 23 faces had turned to look at me in that moment. 23 relatives who had gathered in my home, eaten my food, and exchanged gifts under my tree. The shame had burned through me like wildfire, and I'd excused myself to the kitchen, pretending I needed to check on dessert while really trying to hold back tears. This shocking tale will amaze you, so please support with a like and subscription. Tell me what part of the world you're from. Because what happened next turned our entire family upside down in ways I never could have imagined. My name is Margaret Adams. I'm 50 years old, and I thought I knew my daughter better than anyone in this world. Sarah had always been my baby, even at 25. She'd moved back home after her teaching job ended last spring, and I'd welcomed her with open arms, thinking we'd grown closer than ever. We'd spent countless evenings watching old movies together, sharing stories about her childhood, and I'd even helped her start looking for a new position. Never once did she give me any indication that she blamed me for her father's abandonment when she was just 7 years old. But standing there in my kitchen 3 days ago, listening to the uncomfortable murmur of voices from the dining room, I realized I'd been living in a fantasy. My ex-husband David had walked out on us 18 years ago, claiming he needed to find himself. And I'd spent nearly 2 decades protecting Sarah from the real reasons he left. I'd never told her about the gambling debts, the lies, or the way he'd slowly destroyed our savings account. Instead, I'd given her gentle explanations about how sometimes people grow apart, how it wasn't anyone's fault, how much her daddy loved her, even though he couldn't stay. The worst part wasn't just that she'd aired our most painful family secret in front of everyone. It was the conviction in her voice, the way she'd looked directly at me with such cold certainty when she said it. My own mother, who had driven 3 hours to be with us for Christmas, had actually gasped out loud. My brother Tom, who'd brought his whole family from across town, had immediately started trying to change the subject, but the damage was already done. Tom Adams has always been my rock, ever since we were kids growing up in this same neighborhood. He's 3 years older than me and has this way of staying calm in any crisis, probably from his work as a paramedic. After Sarah's announcement, he'd smoothly guided the conversation towards safer topics, but I could see the concern written all over his face. When everyone finally left that evening, he'd lingered behind, helping me clean up and asking gentle questions about what might have prompted Sarah's outburst. "Maggie, you know that's not true, right?" he'd said, stacking plates in my dishwasher with the same methodical care he'd shown since childhood. "David leaving had nothing to do with you. You were the best wife and mother anyone could ask for." But even Tom's reassurance couldn't quiet the storm in my head. Where had Sarah gotten these ideas? She'd been so young when David left, barely old enough to understand what was happening. For years, she'd seemed to accept my explanations about the divorce. She'd even stopped asking about her father by the time she reached high school, focusing instead on her studies and friends. The next morning, I'd called my best friend, Linda Chen, desperate for someone to help me make sense of what had happened. Linda and I have been neighbors for 15 years, ever since she moved into the blue house across the street with her husband. She's a social worker by training, and she has this incredible ability to see through people's surface behavior to understand what's really driving them. More importantly, She's watched Sarah grow up and knows our family dynamics better than almost anyone. Something must have triggered this, Linda had said when I called her, still in my pajamas and clutching a cup of coffee like a lifeline. Kids don't just suddenly develop these kinds of resentments out of nowhere, especially not Sarah. She's always spoken about you with such love and respect. That's what terrified me most. Sarah had always been my champion, the one who defended me when people made comments about being a single mother, who praised my strength in raising her alone. She'd been my biggest supporter when I went back to school to get my nursing degree, even helping me study for exams. The woman who had stood up at my 50th birthday party 6 months ago and given a tearful speech about how much she admired me couldn't be the same person who had just humiliated me in front of our entire extended family. But here I was, 3 days later, still trying to process what had happened. Sarah had barely spoken to me since Christmas night, responding to my attempts at conversation with one-word answers and avoiding eye contact. She'd been spending most of her time in her room or out of the house entirely, claiming she was job hunting or visiting old friends. The comfortable rhythm we'd developed over the past 8 months had completely disappeared, replaced by this cold tension that made my own home feel like a battlefield. I kept replaying that moment over and over, looking for clues I might have missed. Had there been signs that Sarah was harboring this resentment? Had someone been filling her head with ideas about the past? The certainty in her voice suggested this wasn't just a random emotional outburst. She'd spoken like someone who had thought long and hard about what she was saying, like she'd been waiting for the right moment to reveal what she really believed about our family's history. What made it even more painful was knowing that some of our relatives would probably never look at me the same way again. My cousin Rita had always been a gossip, and I could already imagine her spreading this story throughout our extended family. The thought of people questioning my version of events, wondering if maybe there was some truth to Sarah's accusation, made my stomach churn with anxiety. I'd worked so hard to build a good life for us after David left. I'd gone back to school, built a career, bought this house, and created what I thought was a warm, loving home for my daughter. Every major decision I'd made for 18 years had been filtered through one question: what's best for Sarah? And now she was telling people that I was the villain in our story, that I was responsible for destroying our family. The irony was almost unbearable. I'd spent years protecting her from the truth about her father, thinking I was being noble and mature. I'd never badmouthed David in front of her, never told her about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering how I was going to pay the bills he'd left behind. I'd presented their relationship as something precious and separate from the problems between David and me, encouraging her to maintain contact with him even when he was unreliable about visits and phone calls. Maybe that had been my mistake. Maybe in trying to preserve her image of her father, I'd inadvertently painted myself as the problem. But how could I have done anything differently? She was just a child, and children deserve to love both their parents without carrying the burden of adult complications. As I sat in my living room, surrounded by the lingering evidence of Christmas morning, I realized I was facing a crossroads. I could continue pretending that Sarah's outburst was just a momentary lapse in judgment, hoping things would eventually return to normal. Or I could confront this head-on, try to understand where these feelings were coming from, and find a way to address them honestly. The problem was, I had no idea how to begin that conversation. How do you ask your adult daughter why she suddenly blames you for something that happened when she was 7? How do you defend yourself against accusations that strike at the very core of your identity as a mother? And most importantly, how do you do it without finally revealing the truths you've spent 18 years trying to protect her from? The trap I'd missed finally sprang shut. About what I thought I knew about my daughter, my ex-husband, and the real reason our family fell apart all those years ago. That evening, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I climbed up to the attic and pulled down the box of old papers I'd stored away when we moved into this house. My hands shook as I sifted through the documents, looking for the letters David had sent during those first few months after he left. I'd kept them, though I'd never been sure why. Reading them now, with 18 years of distance, I saw things differently. The anger in his words wasn't just about our marriage falling apart. There was something else there, a defensiveness that I'd missed at the time because I'd been so consumed with my own pain and fear about our future. In one letter, he'd written about needing space to figure things out, about feeling trapped by expectations he couldn't meet. But then there was this line that jumped out at me now. Sarah will understand someday that sometimes people have to make hard choices. I hope she'll know I'm trying to be the father she deserves, even if it doesn't look that way right now. At the time, I'd read that as just another empty promise from a man who was walking away from his responsibilities. But now, I wondered if there had been more to his leaving than I'd understood. The question was whether Sarah knew something I didn't. The next morning, I called my mother. We talked around the subject for a while, discussing the weather and her neighbor's new dog, before I finally found the courage to bring up what had happened at Christmas dinner. Mom, did Sarah say anything else to you after I left the room yesterday? There was a pause on the other end of the line. She was upset, honey. Really upset. But not just angry upset, if you know what I mean. I did know what she meant. I'd seen that look on Sarah's face too, the one that went beyond anger into something deeper and more painful. She kept saying something about how she wished people would just tell the truth for once. My mother continued. I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head and said it was too late now anyway. That phrase kept echoing in my mind throughout the morning. Too late for what? What truth was she talking about? And why did she seem to think I was hiding something from her? Rita called around lunchtime, and I could hear the curiosity in her voice, even as she tried to sound concerned. I've been thinking about yesterday, and I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Sarah seemed really worked up about something. She was just having a bad day, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I wasn't about to give Rita any more ammunition for her gossip mill. Well, if you need to talk about anything, you know I'm here. Sometimes family situations can be more complicated than they seem on the surface. There was something in her tone that made me pause. What do you mean by that? Oh, nothing specific. It's just that sometimes we think we're protecting people by not telling them certain things, but maybe we end up causing more harm than good. After I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rita knew something I didn't. But that was impossible, wasn't it? She lived 3 states away and had never been particularly close to David or me during our marriage. I spent the afternoon replaying conversations from the past few months, looking for clues I might have missed. Sarah had been more distant lately, more likely to change the subject when I asked about her life or her plans after graduation. I'd attributed it to normal teenage independence, the natural process of a young adult starting to separate from her parent. But now I wondered if there was more to it. Had she been pulling away because she was angry with me about something? And if so, what could it possibly be? The hardest part was the uncertainty. I kept second-guessing every interaction we'd had, every decision I'd made over the years. Had I been wrong to encourage her relationship with David, despite his inconsistency? Had I somehow given her the impression that I was the reason he'd been unreliable? Or worse, was there something about the end of my marriage that I'd blocked out or rationalized away? Something that would explain why my daughter looked at me yesterday like I was a stranger. Like I was someone who had betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way possible. By evening, I realized I couldn't continue torturing myself with speculation. I needed to talk to Sarah directly, even if it meant risking another confrontation. But when I called her apartment, she didn't answer. I tried twice more, before finally leaving a voicemail asking her to call me back when she was ready to talk. She didn't call that night, or the next day. By Thursday, I was starting to panic. This wasn't like the normal mother-daughter tensions we'd navigated over the years. This felt like something much bigger, something that could permanently damage our relationship if I didn't figure out how to address it. That's when I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a week earlier. I looked up David's phone number, the one Sarah had given me for emergencies, and realized I was going to have to do something I'd avoided for 18 years. I was going to have to ask my ex-husband what he'd told our daughter about why our marriage really ended. I stared at David's number on my phone screen for what felt like an hour, my thumb hovering over the call button. 18 years. 18 years since we'd had a real conversation, and now I was about to ask him the question I'd been dreading since Christmas morning. The irony wasn't lost on me. For nearly 2 decades, I'd worked so hard to avoid putting Sarah in the middle of whatever had gone wrong between David and me. I'd bitten my tongue when he missed her birthday parties, stayed neutral when she came home disappointed after canceled weekend visits, and always encouraged her to maintain a relationship with him despite his inconsistencies. And now, because of something he might have told her, I was the one she blamed for everything. When I finally pressed call, my heart was hammering so hard I could barely hear the ringing. "Hello?" His voice was exactly the same, and for a moment I was transported back to a time when hearing it would have made me smile instead of feel sick to my stomach. "David, it's Margaret. I need to talk to you about Sarah." There was a long pause. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "She's fine physically, but something happened at Christmas, and I think you might be the only person who can help me understand what's going on." Another pause, longer this time. "What kind of something?" I took a deep breath and told him about Christmas morning, about Sarah's accusation, about the way she'd looked at me like I was a stranger. As I spoke, I found myself watching for any reaction in his silence, any intake of breath or shift in tone that might give me a clue about what he knew. "I don't understand," he said when I finished. "Why would she think you were the reason I left?" "That's what I'm asking you, David." "What have you told her about why our marriage ended?" "Nothing. I mean, nothing specific. When she was younger and asked why we weren't together, I just said sometimes adults can't make things work, that kind of thing. Basic divorce talk." "And recently? Have you talked to her about it recently?" The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then, "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you. Sarah came to see me about a month ago. She was asking questions about our divorce, wanting to know more details now that she's older." My stomach dropped. "What kind of details?" "She wanted to know if there was a specific reason we split up, if someone had done something wrong." I told her that relationships are complicated, but she kept pushing. She said she needed to understand. "And what did you say?" Another pause. I told her the truth, that I left because I felt like I couldn't compete with your career, that I felt like you'd chosen your work over our family. I told her that every time I tried to talk to you about it, you'd shut me down or tell me I was being unreasonable. The words hit me like a physical blow. "David, that's not what happened." "Isn't it? Margaret, you worked 70-hour weeks. You missed dinner more nights than you made at home. When I tried to talk to you about it, you'd say I was being needy, or that you were doing it for our future. I was working those hours because you'd been laid off twice in 3 years. Someone had to keep the lights on and pay for Sarah's daycare and put food on the table. But you never talked to me about it. You just took over everything and made me feel like I was useless. Like you didn't need me for anything. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. The fights we'd had about money, about responsibilities, about the way we'd stopped communicating somewhere along the way. But that wasn't the whole story, and we both knew it. David, you left us. You packed your bags and moved in with Rebecca, while Sarah was at my sister's house for the weekend. You didn't try to work things out. You didn't suggest counseling. You just left. I tried to talk to you for months before that happened. You were never available to listen. So you told our daughter that I drove you away by working too much? That I chose my career over our family? I told her that we both made mistakes. But yes, I told her that I felt like your work was more important to you than we were. I felt like I was going to be sick. She was 7 years old, David. She needed her father, and you chose to leave rather than figure out how to make things work. But you told her it was my fault for working too hard to support us? That's not exactly what I said. But it's what she heard, isn't it? That's why she looked at me like I'd betrayed her. Because you finally told her your version of why you abandoned us, and in your version, I'm the villain. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. David, she worshipped you despite everything. Despite the missed visits and the forgotten phone calls and the fact that you moved 3 hours away and barely saw her through high school. She still defended you. And now, you've taken that away from both of us. Margaret, I didn't mean for it to hurt your relationship with her. She was asking direct questions, and I thought she deserved honest answers. Honest answers? You gave her half the story and let her fill in the blanks. Did you tell her about the drinking? Did you tell her about the credit cards you maxed out behind my back? Did you tell her about Rebecca? That's not relevant to why our marriage ended. The hell it isn't. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Now I understood why Sarah had looked at me with such hurt and anger. In her mind, I wasn't the mother who'd worked herself to exhaustion to keep our lives stable after her father left. I was the woman whose ambition had driven her father away, the person responsible for breaking up our family. And the worst part was, I had no idea how to convince her that there was another side to the story without destroying what was left of her relationship with David. The phone rang in my hands, making me jump. It was Rita. I just had the strangest call, she said without preamble. David called me out of the blue asking if I thought he should talk to Sarah about your conversation. What conversation? What's going on? I took a shaky breath before answering Rita. David finally told Sarah his version of why our marriage ended. Apparently, I'm the villain who chose work over family and drove him away. Oh, honey, no. What did Sarah say exactly? I recounted the Christmas dinner scene and my conversation with David, my voice breaking as I described the look on Sarah's face. Rita listened without interrupting, which I was grateful for. So now she thinks I destroyed our family, I finished. And David has the nerve to call you asking if he should talk to Sarah about our conversation. Like he's the reasonable one trying to manage the situation he created. What did you tell him when he said that about your work being more important? The truth. That I was working 60-hour weeks because he'd maxed out our credit cards and someone had to keep us afloat. That he was drinking more than I realized and having an affair with his co-worker Rebecca. None of which he apparently shared with Sarah when she asked her direct questions. Rita was quiet for a moment. Margaret, you know I love you, but can I ask you something? Were you working a lot before the financial problems started? The question caught me off guard. Well, yes, but I was trying to build my career. We talked about it. Did you talk about it? Or did you tell him that's how it was going to be? I felt defensive, but Rita's tone wasn't accusatory. What are you getting at? I'm not saying David was right to leave or to handle things the way he did. The drinking, the affair, the financial mess, that's all on him. But maybe Sarah isn't entirely wrong that your work was a factor, even if it wasn't the main reason or your fault. So, you think I should have just accepted being a stay-at-home mom forever? Of course not. But maybe there's a way to acknowledge to Sarah that work was important to you without accepting blame for David's choices. Show her the whole picture without making her father into a complete villain. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. She won't even talk to me, Rita. She left Christmas dinner without saying goodbye. How am I supposed to have any conversation with her? Give her a few days to cool off, then try reaching out. Not to defend yourself, just to listen to what she's feeling. 2 days later, I finally worked up the courage to call Sarah. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cool and distant. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. I was wondering if we could talk. About what? About Christmas. About what your father told you. About us. Sarah sighed heavily. I don't really know what to say to you right now. You don't have to say anything. I just want to understand how you're feeling. How I'm feeling. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm feeling like everything I thought I knew about my childhood was wrong. Dad told me you were never home, that you missed my school plays and soccer games because of work meetings. Is that true? My heart sank. Some of it is true, yes. He said he begged you to cut back your hours, that he wanted us to be a real family, but you told him your career came first. Sarah, that's not the whole story. But it's part of the story, isn't it? The part you never told me? I closed my eyes. Rita was right. There were pieces of truth in David's version, even if his version was incomplete and self-serving. Yes, it's part of the story. Can I tell you the rest? There was a long pause on the line. I could hear Sarah breathing, and I wondered if she was going to hang up. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Tell me. I settled into my kitchen chair, looking out at the gray December sky. When you were little, your father and I both wanted me to advance in my career. We talked about how it would give our family more security, more options. He encouraged me to take on bigger projects. But then things changed? Gradually, yes. As I got more successful, the demands increased. I was traveling more, working longer hours. Your father started expressing concerns, but at first they seemed manageable. We'd discuss it, make adjustments, try to find balance. Sarah was quiet, so I continued. You're right that I missed some of your events. I missed your fall play in 4th grade because I had a client presentation that got moved last minute. I missed 3 soccer games that season. Your father was angry about it. I remember that play, Sarah said softly. Dad was there, but he kept looking at his phone. I thought he was texting you. He probably was. I was in Denver, trying to close a deal that would have meant a promotion and a significant raise. I thought I was doing it for our family. But Dad saw it differently. I rubbed my forehead. Yes, he did. By then, he'd started drinking more. Not heavily yet, but enough that I noticed. He said he felt like a single parent, that I'd chosen my career over my family. We fought about it constantly. Why didn't you just cut back your hours? The question I'd been dreading. Because by then, we needed the money. Your father had made some investments that went bad. He hadn't told me about them initially. Our savings were gone, And we had credit card debt I didn't even know about. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. He didn't tell you about the money problems? Not until it was too late to fix them easily. When I found out, I felt trapped. I couldn't scale back my career when we desperately needed every dollar I could bring in. So you worked even more? Yes, and your father resented it more. It became a terrible cycle. The more financial pressure we had, the more I worked. The more I worked, the angrier he got. The angrier he got, the more he drank. I heard Sarah sigh. He told me you refused to listen to his concerns about our family. I did listen, but I felt like he wasn't listening to mine. I was carrying the entire financial burden while he criticized me for working so hard to carry it. Is that when he started the affair? My chest tightened. I don't know exactly when it started. I found out about it 6 months before he left. The woman was someone from his gym, someone who had time to meet him for lunch, to listen to him complain about his workaholic wife. Did you try to work things out after you found out? I wanted to. I suggested marriage counseling, offered to find a way to reduce my hours. But by then, your father had already decided our marriage was over. He said I'd made my choice years ago. Sarah was crying now. I could hear it in her voice when she spoke. I don't understand why he told me it was all your fault. Because it's easier than admitting his part in it. Easier than explaining the drinking and the financial mistakes in the affair. If I'm the villain who chose work over family, then he's just the victim. But you did choose work sometimes. Her words stung, but I knew she needed honesty. Yes, I did. Sometimes I made the wrong choice. Sometimes I prioritized a client meeting over your school event. Sometimes I let work conversations interrupt our family dinners. I wasn't a perfect mother or wife. I just wish I had known all of this before Christmas. When he told me his version, I felt so angry at you. Like my whole childhood had been a lie. Your childhood wasn't a lie, sweetheart. You were loved by both of us. Even when we were struggling. Even when we made mistakes. Sarah sniffled. I was so awful to you at Christmas dinner. In front of everyone. You were hurt and confused. You'd just learned information that changed how you saw your family's history. I should call Rita and David to apologize. My stomach clenched at the mention of my brother David, realizing how my family dinner had been ruined. Rita will understand. She's been worried about both of us since Christmas. What about Uncle David? He looked so uncomfortable when I was yelling. He'll understand too. But Sarah, before you worry about apologizing to anyone else, I need to know where we stand. Can you forgive me for the mistakes I made? Can we work through this together? The line went quiet again, and I held my breath, waiting for her response. I need some time to process all of this, Mom. It's a lot to take in. Of course. Take all the time you need. But I want to understand everything. Will you tell me more about what really happened? Not just the part about work, but everything? The money problems, the drinking, all of it? I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Are you sure you want to hear all the details? Some of it isn't pretty. I'm 26 years old. I think I can handle knowing the truth about my parents' marriage. Okay, yes, I'll tell you everything. Good, because I think I need to hear Dad's side again too, now that I know there's more to the story. My heart sank. You're going to talk to him about this? I have to, Mom. I need to understand why he only told me part of the truth. The fear in my voice must have been obvious because Sarah's tone softened immediately. Mom, I'm not going to ambush him or attack him. I just need to hear his explanation now that I know there's more to consider. I pressed my palm against my forehead, feeling the beginning of a headache forming. I understand that, sweetheart. I do. It's just that your father has a way of making his version sound very convincing. He's had years to perfect the narrative where I'm the one who destroyed our family. But now I'll know what questions to ask. I'll know when he's leaving things out. The resolve in her voice reminded me of myself at that age, determined to get to the bottom of things, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. I couldn't fault her for that quality, even when it terrified me. Just promise me something, I said, moving to the kitchen window and staring out at the bare January trees in my backyard. Promise me that if he tries to convince you that I'm lying about the affair, or the drinking, or the money, you'll come back to me with those accusations. Let me defend myself before you make any decisions about what to believe. I promise, Mom. I'm not going to let him manipulate me again. I'm too angry about being lied to for so long. Relief washed over me, though I knew this was far from over. When are you planning to call him? Tonight, I think. I don't want to put it off and lose my nerve. Sarah, there's something else you should know before you talk to him. I took a deep breath, knowing this next part would be the hardest. The affair wasn't just some random mistake. It was with someone we both knew. Someone I had considered a friend. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Who? It doesn't matter now. She's not in our lives anymore, and I don't want to drag her through this mess too. But I need you to understand that the betrayal wasn't just about him choosing someone else. It was about both of them lying to my face for months while I was trying to save our marriage. Oh, Mom! The pain in her voice made my chest tighten. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how that must have felt. It felt like my whole world was falling apart, like everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Which is probably exactly how you felt on Christmas Day when your father told you his version of events. It was exactly like that, she said quietly. Like the ground was shifting under my feet, and I didn't know what was real anymore. I should have told you the whole truth years ago. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that I was just setting you up to be hurt worse later. Why didn't Dad's drinking and money problems seem obvious to me when I was younger? I considered how to explain this without making her feel guilty for not noticing. You were a child, and then a teenager. Your father was very good at hiding the extent of his drinking, especially from you, and the financial stress mostly showed up in conversations between him and me after you'd gone to bed. We both worked hard to keep our problems from affecting your daily life. But there must have been signs I missed. Sarah, you were not responsible for monitoring your parents' relationship or your father's behavior. That was never your job. I moved away from the window and sat down heavily at my kitchen table. If anything, I should have been more honest with you as you got older. I should have prepared you for the possibility that your father's version of events might not be complete. I keep thinking about all the times over the years when Dad would make little comments about you. About how career-focused you were, how you never had time for family things. I always thought he was just being a little bitter about the divorce. What kind of comments? Like, when I graduated college, he said something about how proud he was that I made time for family events, unlike some people. Or when I got my first apartment, he mentioned how nice it was that I prioritized relationships over climbing the corporate ladder. Each example felt like a small knife twist. He's been building his case against me for years, hasn't he? It seems that way. God, I feel so stupid for not seeing it. You're not stupid. You're his daughter, and you loved him. You wanted to believe the best of him. I rubbed my temples, feeling the full weight of the situation. This is exactly why I'm worried about you confronting him tonight. He's had years of practice at this. But I'm not the same person who believed everything he said without question. I'm angry now, Mom. And I have specific things to ask him about. The determination in her voice was both reassuring and concerning. I knew that anger could be a powerful tool for getting to the truth, but it could also lead to saying things that couldn't be taken back. Just be prepared for him to have explanations for everything. To minimize his drinking as just a few beers after work. To claim the money problems were because of economic downturns or bad luck. To either deny the affair entirely or to blame it on me somehow. How could he possibly blame the affair on you? By saying I was never home, never affectionate, too focused on work to pay attention to his needs. By making it sound like he was so lonely and neglected that he had no choice but to find comfort somewhere else. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was tight with anger. That's disgusting. It's also very convincing when you're hearing it from someone you trust and love. I won't let him do that. Not anymore. I hoped she was right, but I knew how persuasive her father could be when his back was against the wall. Still, she deserved the chance to confront him with the truth and make her own decisions about their relationship. Call me after you talk to him, I said. No matter how late it is or how the conversation goes, I'll be here. I will. And Mom, I love you. I should have said that first before anything else. The simple words made my eyes well up with tears. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone, already dreading what the evening might bring. I knew that in a few hours, my ex-husband would be scrambling to maintain the narrative he'd spent years constructing, and I had no idea what lengths he might go to in order to keep Sarah's sympathy and support. The afternoon stretched endlessly ahead of me, and I realized there was only one person I wanted to talk to while I waited for the confrontation that would determine whether my relationship with my daughter could truly be repaired. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Rita's number, my finger hovering over the call button as I wondered how to explain that the family drama she'd witnessed at Christmas was about to get much more complicated. Rita answered on the second ring, her voice immediately concerned. How did it go with Sarah? I've been thinking about your conversation all afternoon. Better than I expected, actually. She believes me about everything now, and she's planning to confront David tonight about all of it. That's wonderful news. How are you feeling about her talking to him? I leaned back in my kitchen chair, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions. Terrified, honestly. I keep imagining all the ways he could twist this around and make me the villain again. What if he convinces her that I'm lying? What if he makes her choose between us? From what I saw at Christmas dinner, Sarah isn't easily manipulated anymore. She's not the same girl who used to hang on his every word. I know you're right, but 20 years of believing his version of events doesn't just disappear overnight. And David has always been incredibly convincing when he needs to be. Rita was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her thinking. What exactly are you most afraid of him saying to her? That I'm bitter and jealous and trying to poison her against him? That the drinking wasn't as bad as I'm making it sound? That the affair was somehow my fault for not being a good enough wife? The words came out in a rush, exposing fears I'd been trying not to acknowledge. Do you really think Sarah would buy any of that after what you told her today? I don't know. When someone you love looks you in the eye and tells you that everything you think you know is wrong, it's hard not to doubt yourself. Even when you have proof. What kind of proof does she have? I realized I hadn't told Rita about the credit card statements and bank records that Sarah had discovered. She found financial documents that show David was spending money at bars and hotels during our marriage. Concrete evidence that backs up what I told her about the drinking and the affair. Then he can't just explain that away with charm and excuses. Numbers don't lie. No, but he's had practice explaining away financial discrepancies. He used to tell me the bar charges were business meetings, and the hotel expenses were for work conferences that got canceled at the last minute. Did you believe those explanations back then? I wanted to believe them. I was working 2 jobs and taking care of Sarah, and it was easier to accept his stories than to deal with the possibility that my marriage was falling apart. The admission felt heavy, even after all these years. That doesn't make you naive or stupid. That makes you someone who was trying to hold her family together. Rita's words were kind, but they didn't ease the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I just wish I could be there when Sarah talks to him. Not to interfere, but to make sure she doesn't let him gaslight her the way he did me. She's stronger than you think. And she's angry now, which means she'll be asking harder questions than you ever did. That's what worries me. What if her anger pushes him to say something cruel about me? What if he decides that if he's going to lose her anyway, he might as well destroy whatever progress we've made? The possibility hung between us like a dark cloud. I knew David well enough to recognize that when cornered, he could become vindictive in ways that still surprised me. Have you considered calling Sarah before she talks to him? Just to remind her that whatever he says tonight, it doesn't change what happened between you two today? I thought about it, but I don't want her to think I'm trying to control the conversation, or that I don't trust her judgment. Maybe send a text then? Something simple that just lets her know you're thinking about her? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and my heart immediately started racing. It's her, I told Rita. She's calling me back. Go ahead and take it. Call me later if you need to talk. I switched calls, trying to keep my voice calm. Sarah, is everything okay? I'm sitting in my car outside Dad's apartment building, and I'm starting to lose my nerve. Her voice was tight with anxiety. What if confronting him makes everything worse? The vulnerability in her tone reminded me of the little girl she used to be, coming to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings, trusting me to make everything better. You don't have to do this tonight if you're not ready, I said gently. The truth isn't going anywhere. But I need to know, Mom. I need to hear him try to explain those credit card statements and hotel bills. I need to see his face when I ask him about the drinking. Then trust yourself to recognize the truth when you hear it. And remember that whatever he says about me or our marriage, you now know my side of the story too. What if he cries? What if he says he's sorry and promises to be honest from now on? The question revealed how well Sarah knew her father's tactics. Then you'll have to decide whether apologies without accountability are enough for you. I heard her take a deep breath. I keep thinking about all the times he made comments about you being difficult or unreasonable, and how I just accepted them without question. I feel like such an idiot. You were a child who loved both her parents. You're not an idiot for wanting to believe the best about people you care about. I'm going up there now, she said suddenly, before I change my mind again. I'll be here when you're done, no matter how late it is. What if this ruins my relationship with him completely? The question broke my heart because I recognized the impossible position she was in. Then you'll deal with that when it happens. But Sarah, you can't build a real relationship with someone based on lies and half-truths. Whatever comes from this conversation, at least you'll know where you really stand. After we hung up, I realized that the next few hours would determine not just whether my relationship with Sarah could be fully repaired, but whether she would have any relationship with her father at all. I spent the next 3 hours unable to concentrate on anything. I tried watching television, but couldn't follow the plot. I attempted to read, but found myself rereading the same paragraph over and over. Finally, I just sat on the couch, checking my phone every few minutes and wondering how the conversation between Sarah and David was going. At nearly midnight, my phone rang. "Mom?" Sarah's voice was thick with exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite identify. "I'm here. How did it go?" God, I don't even know where to start." I heard her car door slam, then the sound of her footsteps on pavement. "He denied everything at first. Said you were making things up out of spite, that the credit card statements could be explained, that his drinking was never as bad as you claimed." My stomach clenched. "And then?" "I told him I'd seen the bank records myself, that I'd done my own research." That's when he started getting angry instead of defensive. "He said you'd poisoned me against him, that you were vindictive and controlling." Her voice cracked slightly. "But Mom, the way he said it, the look on his face, it wasn't the hurt, confused expression I expected from an innocent person." "What happened next?" "I asked him point blank if he'd been having affairs during your marriage. He got this look, like a trapped animal. Started saying that marriage is complicated, that I was too young to understand, that there were things about your relationship I didn't know." I closed my eyes, recognizing David's pattern of deflection and blame shifting. "That's when I knew," Sarah continued. "Not from what he said, but from what he couldn't say. He couldn't look me in the eye and deny it." "I'm sorry you had to go through that." The worst part was when he started crying. Not because he was sorry for what he'd done to you or our family, but because he was upset that I was questioning him. It was like he was the victim in all of this. I heard her unlock her front door and knew she was home safely. "Are you okay?" "I'm angry. I'm at him for lying to me for 8 years, and at myself for believing it so easily. But also," she paused, "I feel lighter somehow. Like I can finally stop carrying around this version of events that never quite made sense." "What are you going to do about your relationship with him?" "I don't know yet. I told him we needed space while I process everything. He didn't take that well." Sarah's voice hardened. "He said if I chose to believe your lies over his truth, then maybe I wasn't the daughter he thought he raised." The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. Even knowing David as well as I did, I was shocked that he would try to manipulate Sarah that way. "I'm so sorry he said that to you." "You know what's strange? It actually made things clearer, because a parent who really loves their child doesn't try to force them to choose sides by threatening to withdraw love." We talked for another hour, with Sarah asking questions about details she remembered from the divorce, and me filling in context she'd been too young to understand at the time. By the time we hung up, I felt like we'd crossed some invisible bridge back to each other. The next morning, Rita called while I was making coffee. "How did Sarah's conversation with her father go?" I filled her in on everything Sarah had told me, including David's final manipulative comment. "What a piece of work," Rita said disgustedly. "But it sounds like Sarah handled it well." "She's stronger than he gave her credit for." "I think she's stronger than any of us gave her credit for. But I'm worried about Mark." "Why? What's going on with Mark?" Sarah mentioned that David has been talking to him too, probably trying to get ahead of this situation. "Mark hasn't called me, and I'm afraid he's going to feel caught in the middle." "Have you tried reaching out to him?" "I don't want to put pressure on him." Sarah came to me when she was ready to hear the truth. Maybe Mark needs to do the same. Or maybe he needs to know that you're not going to abandon him the way his father seems to be abandoning Sarah. Rita's words stayed with me long after we hung up. By evening, I'd made up my mind to call Mark, but before I could dial his number, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mark standing on my porch, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, and an expression I couldn't read on his face. "We need to talk," he said quietly. I stepped back to let Mark inside, my heart pounding. He looked tired, older somehow than when I'd seen him at Christmas just days ago. The weight of everything that had happened seemed to be sitting heavily on his shoulders. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" I asked, falling back on the instinct to care for him the way I had when he was little. "No, I'm fine." He settled onto the couch, but remained perched on the edge, as if he might need to make a quick escape. "Sarah called me this morning." "Oh." I sat down across from him, giving him space but close enough that we could talk without raising our voices. "How are you feeling about everything?" Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me so much of David, it made my chest ache. "Confused, angry, I don't know what to believe anymore." "What did your father tell you?" "That Sarah was being manipulated by you and Aunt Rita. That you were trying to turn us against him because you never got over the divorce." His eyes met mine, searching. "But Sarah doesn't sound manipulated. She sounds clearer than she has in months." I chose my words carefully. "What do you think?" "I think I've been avoiding looking too closely at things that didn't make sense because it was easier." Mark leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Like how Dad always had an excuse when we were kids for why he couldn't take us for his weekends. Or how he'd promised to come to my games and then not show up. I told myself he was just busy, that work was demanding." "You were protecting yourself. That's completely understandable." "Was it really that bad? The cheating, I mean." "Sarah said there were multiple affairs." The question hung in the air between us. I could hear the pain in his voice, the little boy who had idolized his father struggling with this new information. "Yes," I said quietly. "It was that bad. But Mark, I never wanted you and Sarah to know the details." "I thought it would hurt you more than help you." "Maybe, but lies hurt too." He was quiet for a long moment. "I called Dad after I talked to Sarah." "How did that go?" Mark's laugh was bitter. "About as well as Sarah's conversation did. He basically gave me an ultimatum. Either I cut contact with you and Sarah, or he's done with me too." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. "Mark, I'm so sorry." "You know what the crazy thing is? Part of me almost considered it, because losing the idea of the dad I thought I had feels impossible. But then I realized something." Mark looked directly at me. "The dad I thought I had never really existed, did he?" "The love you felt was real," I said carefully. "Your memories of the good times, those matter. But you're right that he wasn't the person any of us thought he was." "Sarah said you have documentation, proof." I nodded. "I do. If you want to see it, I can show you. If you don't, that's okay too. This has to be your choice, Mark." "I think I need to see it, not because I don't believe you, but because I need to understand the full picture." I went to my bedroom and retrieved the folder I'd shown Sarah. When I returned, Mark was staring out the window, his jaw tight. "Are you sure?" I asked, holding the folder. "Yeah, I'm sure." I sat beside him and opened the folder, explaining each document as I had with Sarah. The credit card statements showing payments to hotels during times when David claimed to be working late. The private investigator's photos. The email exchanges I'd discovered. Mark went through everything methodically, asking questions but remaining outwardly calm. When we reached the end, he closed the folder and set it aside. How long did you know before you filed for divorce? About 6 months. I kept hoping he'd end it on his own, that we could work through it. But then I found out there had been others before this one. Others. Mark's voice was flat. Yes? He stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. I feel like an idiot. Why? Because there were signs, things that didn't add up, but I didn't want to see them. He turned around. Like the time in high school when I surprised him at his office for his birthday, and his secretary acted so weird. She kept saying he wasn't there, but his car was in the parking lot. You were a kid, Mark. It wasn't your job to police your father's behavior? Maybe not, but I'm not a kid anymore. His voice grew stronger. And I'm tired of making excuses for him. What are you going to do? Mark came back to sit beside me. I don't know yet, but I know I'm not choosing between you and him like he wants me to. That's not how family should work. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to blink back tears. I've missed you, both of you. So much. I've missed you too. I think I just convinced myself that the distance was normal, that kids grow up and drift away from their parents. But it wasn't natural, was it? It was him, systematically poisoning our relationship with you. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that we're talking. Mark was quiet for a moment, then said, There's something else. Dad's been dating someone for about a year now. Oh. Yeah, and get this, she's younger than Sarah. The information shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. How do you feel about that? Honestly, it makes everything clearer. Sarah and I always wondered why he was so against us having serious relationships. Every person we dated, he'd find something wrong with them. Now I'm wondering if he was afraid we'd get serious with someone and have less time for him. That sounds like your father. Mark turned to look at me. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything? Are you happy? I mean, really happy? Without him? The question caught me off guard. Yes, I said, realizing as I said it how true it was. It took time, but yes, I'm happier than I've been in years. Good. You deserved better than what he gave you. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both of us processing everything that had been said. Finally, Mark spoke again. I should probably call Sarah. Let her know we talked. She'll be glad to hear from you. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mom, I know this is all complicated and messy, but I'm glad the truth is finally coming out. Me too. After he left, I called Rita to fill her in on the conversation. So, both kids are on the same page now? She asked. It seems that way. But Rita, I'm worried about what David might do next. He's lost control of the narrative he's been building for 8 years. Men like him don't usually go quietly. What do you mean? I mean this might not be over. David's always been someone who needs to win, and right now, he's losing everything. As if summoned by my words, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. I stared at David's name on my phone screen, my heart racing. Rita's voice came through the speaker. Don't answer it, she said firmly. Not tonight. You've had enough for one day. But even as she spoke, the ringing stopped. Almost immediately, a text message appeared. We need to talk. Now. He's texting me, I told Rita. What does it say? That we need to talk. You don't need to do anything he says anymore. Remember that. Another text came through. The kids are making a huge mistake. You're poisoning them against me. I read it aloud to Rita, who made a disgusted sound. Classic David, she said. He can't accept that his own actions caught up with him. A third text. I'm coming over. Rita, he says he's coming here. Then don't open the door. You don't owe him anything. But I knew David. When he decided he wanted something, he didn't give up easily. 20 minutes later, I heard his car in the driveway. I have to go, I told Rita. He's here. Call me if you need anything. I mean it. The doorbell rang 3 times in quick succession, followed by sharp knocking. I took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. Take the chain off, Margaret. We need to talk like adults. We can talk like this. David's face was flushed, his jaw tight. The kids called me, both of them. Do you have any idea what you've done? I haven't done anything except tell the truth. Your version of the truth. You've turned them against me. David, I didn't have to turn them against anything. They saw through your manipulation on their own. Manipulation? His voice rose. I protected them from your bitterness for 8 years. I kept them from seeing how angry and vindictive you became after our divorce. Is that what you call it? Protection? Yes. And now you've undone all of that work in one night. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The same feeling I used to get during our marriage when he'd twist reality until I questioned my own memory. But this time, I recognized it for what it was. David, do you even hear yourself? You're talking about our children like they're possessions you can control. I'm talking about being a good father. Something you wouldn't understand since you were too busy wallowing in self-pity to fight for them. The old me would have taken that bait, would have defended myself or apologized. Instead, I said simply, I'm not going to argue with you about the past. Well, you should, because Mark thinks I deliberately sabotaged his relationship with you. Where would he get an idea like that? Maybe from 8 years of you doing exactly that. David's face darkened. I never said anything about you that wasn't true. You told them I didn't want custody. You didn't fight for it. Because you threatened to drag them through a custody battle if I did. You said you'd make them choose between us in court. I never said that. Yes, you did. And you know what? It doesn't matter anymore whether you admit it or not. The kids are adults now. They can see the pattern for themselves. David was quiet for a moment. Then his expression shifted to something I recognized. The look he got when he was about to try a different strategy. Margaret, I know we've had our differences, but we both love those kids. Can't we work together to fix this? There's nothing to fix. For the first time in years, Sarah and Mark and I are actually talking honestly with each other. But they're angry with me. Mark barely spoke to me on the phone, and Sarah... He paused. Sarah said some very hurtful things. Like what? She said she felt like she'd been living a lie, that she couldn't trust anything I'd told her about our marriage or the divorce. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy, not for David, but for the situation. That must have been difficult to hear. It was, and it wasn't fair. I did what I thought was best for them. No, David, you did what was best for you. There's a difference. He leaned against the doorframe. So, what happens now? You get the kids and I lose them? This isn't about winning and losing. It's about having honest relationships with our children. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're angry with. They're not angry because you're a terrible person, David. They're angry because they feel deceived. If you want to repair your relationship with them, you need to acknowledge what you did and apologize. Apologize for protecting them? I sighed. If that's really how you see it, Then I don't think there's anything more to say. David stared at me for a long moment. You're really going to let our family fall apart over this? Our family fell apart 8 years ago. What's happening now is the beginning of putting it back together. Honestly, this time. After David left, I felt emotionally drained, but also strangely peaceful. My phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. Mom, did Dad come over there? How did you know? He called me after he talked to Mark. He was furious. I was worried he might try to intimidate you. He tried, but I'm okay. Good, because I wanted to tell you something. Mark and I talked for 2 hours tonight. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in years. How do you feel? Angry, sad, but also relieved. It's like I can finally see clearly. All those years, I thought there was something wrong with me for missing you so much, for wanting to spend more time with you. Dad always made it seem like that was betraying him somehow. You weren't betraying anyone by loving me, Sarah. I know that now. And Mom, we want to start over. Really start over. Not just phone calls and awkward dinners, but actually being a family again. I'd like that more than anything. Mark's coming over tomorrow. We thought maybe we could all have lunch together? Just the 3 of us? For the first time in years, planning something with both my children felt natural instead of complicated. I would love that, I said. Mom, I'm sorry for everything, for believing his version of events, for pulling away from you, for saying those things at Christmas. You don't need to apologize, sweetheart. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. Still, I'm sorry, and I love you. I love you too. After we hung up, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For 8 years, I'd been living in reaction to David's choices, letting his manipulation define the boundaries of my relationships with our children. But tonight, for the first time, Sarah and Mark had chosen me not because they were angry with their father, but because they wanted a real relationship with their mother. That made all the difference.